Hi, gang. Here's your Thursday poll question at Smerconish.com. Did the ends of the Democrat-supported government shutdown justify the means? Did the ends justify the means? Or said differently, was it worth it? I'm a no vote on this. I think there are legitimate issues that were raised by Democrats. I've said that consistently, but I don't believe that this was the way to advance them. They did frame the issue. They definitely did frame an issue for debate about healthcare policy in the United States. That was probably coming anyway as people opened up their premium increases. It's going to come roaring back in January, but I just don't think you can marginalize the federal workforce. Thank you to Parks Casino. I mentioned the last 2 days, hey, get your tickets quickly for December 7. They're not only having a Pearl Harbor remembrance, but they're having this really special night, bringing in vocalist Michael Maglio, backed by Pete Spina and the City Rhythm Orchestra for Songs for Sinatra Lovers. Good news, bad news. Good news if you have tickets. Bad news, it's sold out for everybody else. Don't say I didn't warn you. Okay, and now I'm similarly not warning you, but inviting you to participate with a lot of other great entertainment that's coming to Parks Casino. Classic Rockers Grand Funk Railroad, right? We're an American band. Don't make me sing it. 16-time Grammy winner David Foster and Catherine McPhee, the Marshall Tucker Band, and Jefferson Starship, Broadway star Alan Cumming, Uncut, his new one-man cabaret show, Piano Men, Generations, a tribute to Billy Joel and Elton John. Oh, comedian Tracy Morgan, Kathleen Madigan, another great comedian, and Melissa Etheridge. Those are some new names. Tickets for all these shows available for the acapella sounds of Straight No Chaser, comedian Kem Jung, and the Get the Let Out Zeppelin tribute. Parks, PARXcasino.com to buy all of your tickets, PARXcasino.com/entertainment. You got to be 21. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. I thought that yesterday, Richard Hassan, Professor Hassan from UCLA Law School, was a great guest. And the conversation that we had was about a case that the Supreme Court has just accepted. They've not yet entertained argument, but it has to do with Mississippi, one of about 30 states that permit those ballots that are received, that are cast and postmarked by Election Day and received within 5 days thereafter still to be counted. That was the impetus for yesterday's poll question at Smerconish.com. Should the Supreme Court allow states to count mail-in ballots postmarked by Election Day, but arriving afterward? And it was very decisive. A lot of votes, 37,820 votes cast. The yes votes, 85.67%. I said yesterday when we were together at this time for YouTube Live and for the daily poll podcast, I wanted to hear what Professor Hassan had to say on this, because my inclination was to be a no vote. My inclination was to say there needs to be finality, and that finality ought to come on Election Day. So vote by mail. I am a huge proponent of voting by mail. I know that the Trump administration, the president, is a critic of that process because he doesn't think it suits his interest. I like the convenience, and I want to be supportive of voting by mail. My overall objective is I want more people voting because I want to water down the fringe. The fringe is coming out to vote in every election, especially in the primary elections. I want everybody else voting. But in this instance, my initial inclination of saying ballots ought to be in by Election Day as well, I felt more comfortable after talking to Professor Hassan that Mississippi is doing the right thing, and so too are other states, and I'm sympathetic to military ballots in particular. So I ended up ultimately voting with the majority, the yes votes on the poll question yesterday. I also didn't know before the Supreme Court took that case that there are 30 states. I think it's 29 plus the District of Columbia that have that practice. So that was yesterday's result. I similarly expect big voting today. Did the ends of the Democrat-supported government shutdown justify the means? As you know, it ended last night. First time that the House was in session since September 19. So this thing went on for a hell of a long time. President Trump, with some fanfare, signing the bill that was passed by the House after the Senate had already passed it in the 9 o'clock hour last night. And this after the swearing in of Adelita Grijalva. I think I now have the pronunciation down correctly, who was elected 7 weeks ago. And there's already, this question of her role in triggering the release of the Epstein files, something that I'll be discussing at length on radio today as well. Anyway, bottom line, was it worth it? Was it worth it? The most progressive elements of the Democratic Party continue to blame Chuck Schumer, even though Chuck Schumer voted no. He wasn't one of the 8 who voted to reopen. But from CNN's coverage, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer went out of his way to embody the anger of his Democratic base during this fall's funding showdown with Republicans, an intentional turnaround from his capitulation last March. He's still taking the blame from many in his party anyway, despite voting against the final deal on Monday night, the New York Democrat again being pummeled by vocal Democrats across the party who argue he allowed his centrist members to strike a deal. So he's bearing the brunt of this schism within the Democratic Party that I've been talking about between the more progressive and fired up elements and the more centrist or moderate. I hate to even use that label because by my standards, none of them are really that moderate. But was it worth it? Because in the short term, they're so upset, the progressive elements of the Democratic Party, because what? They wanted a guarantee of the continuation of these ACA, Obamacare subsidies, and they didn't get it. But they might get it, because this measure is only going to keep the government funded until January, and then perish the thought we're going to be doing it all over again. But by January, things will have changed. And what will have changed is that people will now be paying or have paid for health insurance where their premiums have skyrocketed, even if they're not part of the subsidies. I'm not part of the subsidies of the ACA. I bought my insurance on the exchange many years ago when it was initially launched, went on, had 25 or so different plans to choose from. And because I'm an independent contractor, that's how I buy my health insurance and the health insurance for my family. So I'm still involved in the exchange. I'm not a beneficiary of the subsidies, but here's the point. My premiums are going up 22.6% come January. So we're all getting stuck. It's a great issue. Great meaning it's a healthy issue for debate, and the Trump administration has no alternative. They have no alternative. I just don't think holding hostage military personnel from paychecks and TSA agents and air traffic controllers and the rank and file of the bureaucracy for whom I have respect because I used to work for them and with them, I don't think this is the way you go about it. Ali Vitale, writing for MSNBC, most lawmakers expect that vote to fail, meaning the promised vote that's going to come up in the Senate, but it will place the blame for skyrocketing premiums squarely on Republicans. I will say this not in a complimentary way, but just as a factual observation that acronym of the TACO acronym, Trump always chickens out, not this time. And I think Democrats hadn't anticipated that. I mean, despite the election result that you saw in New Jersey and Virginia and in California and in New York City, despite the loss of food stamps, despite the disruption of air travel, none of it caused the White House or the Republicans to blink. They were resolute. Even though red states were disproportionately impacted by the food stamp issue. So I think that took Democrats by surprise. And I'm not, again, complimenting the bravado or the backbone of the Republicans. I'm just saying that's what transpired. And in the end, the pain being inflicted by the shutdown became too much for the 8 Democrats who voted to reopen the government. I'm looking at Tim Kaine, who wrote an op-ed for the New York Times today on exactly this subject. The shutdown was awful. I voted to end it. Quote, people suffered. Food banks across the country ran out of supplies. Americans went hungry after the Trump administration cruelty withheld SNAP benefits, previously known as food stamps. Nearly 1.5 million federal employees went without pay, including air traffic controllers, leading to canceled flights and a significant delay at airports. The White House meaningfully engaged only after Republicans suffered big losses in last week's election. After a lot of back and forth, we reached an agreement around 5 p.m. Sunday. But the Republicans really didn't give up anything other than saying we'll have a vote, which they probably were willing to promise at all times. And whether Speaker Johnson similarly has a vote that was promised in the Senate remains to be seen. There was a lot written yesterday on exactly this issue. The Times and the Post had front page stories as to whether Democrats, having lost this battle, are going to win the war. For example, quote, "At first blush, the deal that paved the way to end the government shutdown this week looked exactly like the kind of feeble outcome many Democrats have come to expect from their leaders in Washington. After waging a 40-day fight to protect Americans' access to health care, one they framed as existential, their side folded after 8 defectors struck a deal that would allow President Trump and the Republicans to reopen the government. But even some of the Democrats most outraged by the outcome are not so certain that the party's aborted fight was all for naught." And this is what I'm asking in the Thursday poll question. They assert that in hammering away at the extension of healthcare subsidies that are slated to expire, they managed to thrust Trump and the Republicans on the defensive and elevated this political issue. I think that's true. I think that's true. But again, my question is, was it worth it? Not at the expense of federal workers who went 40 plus days without being paid. I get it. Their pay cycle means they were paid less than the 40 days, but I don't think it was fair to marginalize them. That quote was from the New York Times. Washington Post: "The votes by a handful of Democratic senators this week to end a government shutdown without key concessions from Republicans have left the party bruised and divided, struggling to explain to a furious base why they folded without securing the healthcare subsidies they called essential." The base wants a brawl. The base wants a brawl, and they wanted to continue it, but the Trump administration was showing no give, and consequently, they folded the tent, and I think they did the right thing. Was it worth it? Was it worth it? Did Democrats potentially lose the battle, but might they still win the war? Or as I worded it, did the ends of the Democrat-supported government shutdown justify the means? Go to Smerconish.com, cast your ballot on the Thursday poll question. If you're watching me on YouTube, thank you. Make sure you're a subscriber to the channel. We appreciate that very much. And set yourself up for notifications. And if you're listening to the podcast and you've never watched on YouTube, give that a try. You might enjoy it. I do it most days of the week, okay? Only Sunday am I not here and not talking about the daily poll question. Thank you, everybody. Go vote on the poll question. I'll see you on radio soon.